Daniel Fuller was a bastard. Everybody knew it. He was rude in restaurants, bossed around auto mechanics working on his car, ridiculed anyone with politics against his own, not to mention all foreigners and those in the LGBTQ community. People all over town would cringe when he walked into stores, or even when he just passed them in the street. People held their breath and waited till he passed and exhaled with a grimace, a sheer shiver of disgust. This was a hated man. He hid his true nature from only one person, his Aunt Ruth. Ruth was wealthy, very wealthy, lived in a mansion on the outskirts of town, on the side of a great hill that provided visibility for miles around. Ruth loved Daniel, though, as he would tend to her and bring her anything she wanted. Around his aunt, he was all smiles and pleasantry, but he was waiting. One rainy evening, Aunt Ruth called Daniel to her bedside. She told him that she felt so weak that she felt like she was slipping away. She further explained that very afternoon she called her lawyer and made arrangements to have Daniel fully provided for in her will. The document came by courier while Daniel was out, and it took Ruth a very long time to get to the door, but the courier waited. She signed, and it became so. Daniel could hardly contain his excitement. He was going to be rich and own the house on the hill where he could look down on all those living below as unworthy peasants in his eyes. He daydreamed incessantly about a great fortune, about trips to exotic locales, and having every material thing he ever wanted. Even when he was tending to his aunt in a facade of pleasantry and care, his excitement was hard to contain. One day Ruth told Daniel that she was feeling much better and no longer felt as though she was slipping away. Daniel was stunned. He didn't know whether to scream or cry or both. This was a life he now felt trapped in, tending to his aunt, pretending to be someone and something he wasn't, possibly for years to come. One night shortly thereafter, Daniel looked through a crack in the bedroom door and saw his aunt sleeping, a thin puff of breath escaping her lips over and over, which, while not snoring, told Daniel that she was in fact asleep. He quietly slipped in, admiring his cleverness in lubricating the hinges on the door that day while Ruth was in the bathroom. Once in, he picked up the cell phone that was next to her on the nightstand. He quietly left the room with the phone in hand. He went downstairs, then outside, then walked a few hundred feet down the driveway that would soon be his. He dropped the cell phone on the cement over and over until the screen cracked. The next phase of his plan was to return the phone to the bedroom, but place it on the floor next to the bed, only partially visible. He left, went to his own room, and dreamed of stepping off the stairs of his own private jet where people would come to him, bringing flowers, offering dinners, and to carry his bags. All the trappings of the elite. The next morning he was awakened by his aunt yelling for him. He dragged himself out of bed and walked down the hall.
"Daniel, where's my cell phone? It was right here when I fell asleep last night."
He pretended to care, and looking around the nightstand as if to show his thoroughness, he finally dropped to his knees and peered under the bed. "Got it," he exclaimed. "Oh, no, you're not going to be happy with this, Aunt Ruth." He held up the phone for her to see that it was damaged. "No worries," he said. "I'll take it to get repaired today. You just rest." He left the room with the phone, gently closed the door, and blew her a kiss. She smiled. That was 9 a.m. By 10 a.m., the shouting started.
Daniel, I need help getting out of bed. Please, I'm hungry."
Hours passed, and she continued to call for him, until her throat was so scratched she could barely swallow. The glass of water on the nightstand had been drunk the night before, and she had no way of getting more. By afternoon, she was desperate for food and to use the bathroom. She started worrying about Daniel, too. What if something had befallen him? He's never not been there for her before. Ultimately, her aged bladder could no longer hold a urine, and she peed in the bed, soaking her sheets, her covers, herself, and the mattress.
"Daniel, help! I've made a mess."
She waited what seemed to be an eternity and convinced herself that something had happened to him. Against all doctor's orders, not to mention common sense, she tried to get out of the bed by herself. A few seconds later, her frail body tumbled out of the bed and hit the floor. Hard. There was a sickening crunch-like sound, and she knew instinctively that she had broken her hip. The pain was almost unbearable. Daniel!" she screamed.
I broke my hip. Call 911. I don't have my phone.
A voice came from behind the closed door. "What do you want, you miserable old bitch?" Ruth was shocked, stunned, and through the pain let out a wail of fear and disbelief.
I need help. I need help,
she screamed. He went downstairs and made himself a sandwich. He turned on a radio and made it just loud enough so that he couldn't hear her cries anymore. After eating, he wanted to return to his bedroom and started up the stairs.
Daniel, I can hear you coming. Won't you save me? I'm in so much pain.
His response, shouted to her, was an angry, "What the hell do you want now, you disgusting old crone?" It was at that moment Ruth realized she was in trouble. Big trouble. What had happened to turn Daniel into such an evil monster, she thought. From the floor, she looked around. She couldn't move her body at all, as the pain was far greater than anything she had ever experienced. She could see that the window was shut. She tried calling out,
Help me, help me. I've broken my hip. Please help.
Daniel in his room shouted back, "Stop calling me! I can't help you! What do you want from me?" He felt secure in the fact that they were far enough up the hill that no one could hear her cries. Except him, and he was sick of it. This started a cycle of, help me, from Aunt Ruth, and Daniel shouting back, "Leave me alone! What do you want from me?" over and over again. Darkness fell around 7 p.m., and Ruth's pitiful cries stopped about a half an hour before that. Thank God, he thought. No more of her yelling. Mockingly, he imitated her with a high, uneven voice.
Oh, Daniel, help me. I'm so frail and so pitiful. Please save me.
He then played the part of himself, yelling back, "For God's sakes, what the hell do you want from me?" He started saying, "What do you want from me?" over and over, morphing into a song that debuted on a TV singing show. "What do you want from me? What do you want from me?" he sang over and over again. He had a terrible voice. He also had no idea what the other lyrics were, so he just kept singing the same phrase over and over. Eventually, he tired of that and reheated some beef stew he had the day before. He knew the next few hours would be instrumental to the event. After eating, he went back upstairs and looked in his aunt's room. She was there on the floor with a sickly bluish complexion, her eyes open, staring blankly ahead. Drool had made a puddle on the hardwood floor. Daniel was disgusted by the sight, but knew that this is what he had to go through to earn his fortune. He went downstairs, made a sandwich, ham and cheese on rye, grabbed a bag of pretzels, and put several next to it on the plate. As a finishing touch, he put an apple on the tray, as well as a glass of water. He went back upstairs and tossed the sandwich and pretzels on the floor, as if Ruth had actually dropped them. He rolled the apple so that it ended up under the window and smiled to himself over his cleverness. Lastly, he stood next to the bed, over Ruth's body, and flung the water out in an arc that looked, he thought, very realistic. Only then did he call 911. And a few minutes later, led in the paramedics and sheriff's deputies that arrived. "Here," he shouted, "up the stairs, she isn't moving." He pretended to cry and slobber the words, "Oh, please save her, she's all I have." It was obvious to everyone that she was quite dead, and the black pools of blood under the skin were indications that it had occurred sometime earlier. Daniel managed to half scream, half sob, and it was just passable enough that the first responders didn't think anything of it. Through his tears, he explained, "I had to go out all day, so I left Aunt Ruth with a tray of food for lunch, and I was going to prepare a nice supper when I got home, and I came home to this." He wrinkled his face in supposed despair. It worked. Ruth was cremated, as were her wishes, and there was a small service attended by no one, as anyone who had ever known Ruth had either left town or died years earlier. Daniel walked out with an urn of her ashes. He drove over 30 minutes and got to a deserted spot in a wooded area with a lake. He walked to the edge of the water with the urn and threw it with all his strength into the water. He chuckled. He was free. He was rich. And he never had to say, "What the hell do you want?" ever again. Life was good for Daniel. He had luxurious food delivered and shut the door without giving a tip. Every time. Food delivery drivers hated to go there. Not only was it awful to have to see somebody who was so unpleasant, but to be treated like slave labor and have a door shut in their faces, well, that was about all anybody could stand. Days passed uneventfully, and one night, sitting next to the fireplace in the great room, he thought he heard something. He stood up and cocked his head to the side in an attempt to hear better. The sound came again. It was like a soft moan. It could have been caused by the wind. What else could it be? He said out loud to himself, as he loved the sound of his own voice. He walked through the kitchen, glancing at the kitchen windows in passing, verifying that there were no openings with which to let in a gust of air. He walked to the rear of the house, checking all the windows as he did so, and every few minutes he would hear the sound again. The more he heard it, the more he was convinced that it was a moan. An animal. Yes, an animal is probably trapped in the basement and can't get out or is injured, Daniel thought. He hated all animals, unsurprisingly, but still went down to eliminate what was disrupting his quiet evening alone. Before starting down the stairs, he walked to the side entryway and grabbed a shovel that was leaning against the doorframe, ready for any snow that came his way. He carried it with him. A weapon? He thought. More like something so I don't have to get close to any disgusting animal. He descended the stairs, looked around, and there was no animal to be seen. But the moan happened again. It was hard to tell where it was coming from, but if nothing else, he knew it was not in the basement. He went outside, still carrying the shovel, and scrutinized the exterior for any evidence of cracks where a stray squirrel or a bird could have gotten lodged, but found nothing. As soon as he stepped back into the house, he heard the moan again. It was definitely coming from upstairs, he thought. He left the shovel at the base of the stairs and ascended. He walked slowly down the hall, trying not to make any noise that would keep him from discovering the source. 1 bedroom, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, 2 closets. The sound was not coming from any of them, but yet it continued. Daniel was getting more and more angry as it continued. He was going to get to the bottom of this once and for all, but first he had to pee. He heard the moan again as he walked into the bathroom on the other side of the hall. He entered the bathroom, stood in front of the toilet, and opened his fly. He reached down to open the lid. And there was a disembodied head in the toilet, staring upward with black holes where eyes should have been, and a black-filled mouth, no teeth, that was stretched incredibly wide. The moan was coming from this, but he had no time to realize that as he screamed in fright, stepped backwards, lost his footing, and hit his head on the edge of the bathtub. A large crack opened in his head from which blood and brain matter was escaping. It was all over in just a minute. He made no sound, and it would have been quite evident to anyone there that he, too, was dead. The head in the toilet cackled with maniacal laughter.
What do you want from me? What do you want from me?
It mocked while laughing.
That, you son of a bitch! That's what I wanted from you!